Good afternoon. It is Friday, May 16th, 2025. And we're taking another look at this project I'm working on called $5 in the World. It's a collection of stories and experiences and sayings that my dad had over 101 years of life. 101. He was born in 1916 and he left us in 2017 and lived a full and remarkable life. And the reason I'm doing this is actually, there's more than one reason. One reason I'm doing is to honor the memory of my dad. He had a huge impact on my life, still does, and lots of people I know as well. Two, I really believe in a world that's a little bit unsure of itself, a little bit cynical, maybe a lot cynical, very conflicted. Um, his philosophy, his way of approaching life, I think is beneficial. I know it is. I saw it work in his life through all kinds of circumstances. And when I've used the things he taught me, I know that life has gone better than when I don't. And so I just wanted to share it, but hopefully it'll give people some hope, gives people some ideas, reframe some things for people to see things in a different way, introduce people to a person that was really worth knowing. And for those who did know him, I think it'll give them really good memories as they think back on what it was like to have him around. So every week on Friday, usually, I will get on here on YouTube and talk about the idea of this story. Um, Read a short chapter. They're all pretty short chapters, almost like devotional length, and then talk a little bit more about it. I have the live chat on. Hi, Mark. So if you want to ask questions or make comments about what we're talking about, feel free to do so. I'm really relying on interaction and feedback to refine the project, to make the stories better, to make them more relevant, or really just general improvement. It keeps me on task, knowing I'm going to do this every Friday. Make sure I don't skip any chapters, and that I just stay at it because this isn't my day job. Um, but it's something I've come to really like doing. And I do appreciate those of you that come on here live or in replay to go on the journey with me. And I ask that, if you do like this, you find it beneficial, please like it, share it, comment on it, subscribe if you haven't already. It's free, but it does all open up some other options for you to get on here and do some things. But anything you can do to help me circulate this, I would really appreciate it. So that said, the chapter I wrote for today is called the 90-10 rule. And it had to do with my dad's philosophy on problem solving. And I think once I get into it, you're going to see what I mean by the 90-10 rule. And I think it made a big difference in how he approached things. It fit in well with the way he looked at the world and looked at himself and those around him. And I think I know it helped him keep moving forward when a lot of people gave up. A lot of people would quit. That was one thing he didn't do. When something ran out of gas, when it was done, he understood it was done. He had wisdom too. But man, as long as there was time on the clock, as long as there was a chance something could work out, he would go all in for it. And he had a way of going about it in a way that wasn't begrudgingly. He didn't have like this dread about difficulties. He had almost kind of it seemed to motivate him. It seemed to bring out his competitive juices. It seemed to bring out the best in him very often. Because he wanted to rise to the challenge, and he thought he was up for it, and he knew people would help him. He knew that God was, a good God, and wanted what was right for him. And he had confidence. I've heard some really good definitions of confidence over the last year or so as I've been working on this. And one of them is confidence is the willingness to try. It's definitely confident that way. Um, a, a belief that I can handle something, a belief that I can figure it out. Uh, that's confidence. He definitely had that. And the belief that people wanted there were enough people wanted what was good for me that I had help. I could get help if I needed it. He definitely believed that. Confidence in other people. But so all of those things combined helped drive this attitude he had. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's a couple pages. It's called this chapter is called the 90-10 rule. I hope, I hope that, I hope it helps. Optimism often gets written off as being unrealistic or a type of denial. There are people with these perspectives that call themselves optimistic. I don't think that overlooking the downsides of a decision or downplaying the possibility of the worst case scenario makes somebody an optimist. The optimists I've known usually possess a clear understanding of risk, possibility of failure, and negativity. They can acknowledge a situation as being lousy. It's just that an optimist is convinced that it does not have to be that way or stay that way. My dad was an optimist of the highest order. He knew when a situation proved to be a problem. He dealt with thousands of problems over the course of 101 years. He went to great lengths to understand them, who was causing the problem, what wasn't working, who needed help, and so on. He believed that possessing clarity about the challenge made a solution more likely, so he wanted to know about problems. We all know people that become experts about reasons why things are terrible in a given situation. Other people settle in as critics of anything that gets attempted. There is no shortage of people around to explain why something can't or won't change. The focus for most people going through a problem is the problem itself. This narrow perspective will impede people from seeing the way out of the problem and may even lead to a spirit of resignation. My dad had a different approach to problems. When we would discuss a business challenge and start warming to the complexity of the problem, he would say, "Okay, so let's start working on the solution. We should spend only 10% of our energy on the problem and 90% of our energy on the solutions." This approach is a game changer for growth and progress. It comes from a place of optimism, the idea that there is a way to make something work, make something better. Optimism is the belief that there is a way to get things done, and it's our job to discern the solutions. Once we spend enough time to define the problem, we can move on to thinking and experiment. We can move on to the thinking and experimenting it takes to get the solutions we need. It is so easy to fall into the numbness of ruminating on the problem. Problems begin to feel personal and unique. They begin to feel permanent. Problems can loom so large it becomes difficult to think of anything else. My dad saw a lot of this around him. He lived through the Depression, the scarcities and losses of World War II, the death of loved ones, business cycles, and his own health challenges in his old age. Through all of these moments and many more, Dad consistently looked for a way through. He asked himself, what was the next best thing that could be done? One story from his early days in the mobile home business around 1946, 1947 would illustrate this a little bit. There were still shortages of just about everything due to war rationing. One glaring shortage was rubber tires. Most of the mobile homes in those days had wooden tires. People hated those. Dad found a source for rubber tires and was able to sell mobile homes with the coveted rubber tires when the rest of his competitors had the substitute wheels. I've already told you the story of the business deal he crafted to save his company. I told the story of his move from successful business owner to bankruptcy to executive. And with every step of the way, he looked for the solutions that made the best of what he had to work with. He never gave in to a spirit of despair or resignation. He was a creative and resourceful person. He was willing to ask for help along the way. He didn't think that life was a solo act. I loved this combination of confidence and humility when it came to getting things accomplished. During times of duress, it's easy for relationships to fray. Families fall apart. Friends can become enemies. Business partners can become rivals. When somebody consistently shifts everybody's focus back to favorable possibilities, relationships can be strengthened through the storms. When a leader provides direction and hope beyond the immediate crisis, people tend to rally. Dad provided this kind of leadership throughout the time I knew him. I've heard stories from before I was born, and this was a trait for much of his life. A cousin of his told me at Dad's memorial service that Dad became a go to person for problem solving in the extended family. He said, "It was strange how that reliance on Burr came about. When he was younger, people said that Burr was a good guy, but not terribly reliable. Then, about the time he was 40, all of that changed dramatically. He became the person anybody could count on." I know exactly why this change took place. The biggest problem Dad ever contended with in his life, the cause of so many other problems as well, was his drinking. He really liked to drink alcohol, and he drank a lot of it and often. From his teen years through most of his 30s, drinking and partying proved central to his life. Alcohol contributed to his dropping out of Michigan State. It made tensions at home bad enough to get him dropped off at M55 and 131 when he was barely in his 20s. It made it difficult for him to get traction in a career. He was not the best husband for his wife, Bonnie. He did thrive in some ways through it all. He did find some success as a mobile home salesman and eventually became an owner of a dealership. He worked hard and played hard. One night, it caught up to him in a big way. In a car accident, he broke his femur and needed an operation. On the table, his heart stopped. They brought him back to life and fixed his leg. He was laying in the hospital bed when he overheard his sister Maxine talking to his wife Bonnie about how they had almost lost him. It was in this moment when he realized that so many of his problems were due to his heavy drinking. He had spent so much time justifying his behavior, rationalizing the shortcomings and inadequacies. He pinned blame to anything other than his drinking. In the quiet and isolation of the hospital room, he found some clarity. He had the resolution in that hospital bed that he would stop drinking, and while he was at it, he would give up his 3 packs a day smoking habit as well. He was 38 years old at this time. By God's grace and his resolve, Dad never did smoke or drink again. He was so thankful that he had 8 years of sobriety with Bonnie before her untimely death. He made up for so much of what had been wrong. My favorite comment from this period was from his dad, Charlie. Years later, after so much had healed, he said, "If I'd have known that all it took to get your attention was to have a broken leg, I would have broken the damn thing years ago." It was from this time forward that his cousin noticed the shift in Dad's family status. My only exposure to Dad's drinking was stories of his past, and so many of the people that stayed his friends even after he quit drinking. In solving the biggest problem of his life, Dad finally spent enough time on a solution to break free and open up a life that went on to influence so many people in so many wonderful ways. Yeah. So that is my dad's take on problems. We'd be sitting around, like I said, we would be going. He would be a consultant for us with our company. My brother and I bought a mobile home company in the '90s. My dad was well into his sneaking up on 80 some years old, and he was our consultant. And we would sit around the table at our board meetings and talk about this problem, this interest rate issue, or this advertising not working, or our sales are down, or people aren't coming in, or this isn't working, or that isn't working. And we'd go on for a while. Like I said, we could warm to that subject. And my dad would sit and he'd listen, he would chip in, but eventually he would always come back to something along the lines of what I said. He'd say, "Okay, we got the problem figured out. Now let's start talking about solutions." It wasn't that he didn't want to admit that problems existed. Like I said in the chapter, he understood. He knew that when things weren't good. He knew things when things were tough. He knew when things weren't working, but he didn't turn that into the story. He turned that into the thing that needed to be solved. He turned that into the thing that needed to be addressed. And he would turn all of his rumination, his thinking, his meditation, his planning, his discussions about how we could make something work. I saw him do it over and over again. Um, like I said, all through my life, I saw it on display. I remember one time we missed the signups for football. I was just getting into it. I was actually starting to get kind of good. It was boys club football. I was in elementary school. But somehow we might have been on vacation or somehow, some way we missed the cutoff. We missed the sign up, which meant I wasn't going to be able to play football that year. I was crushed, and I was convinced that there was nothing we could do about it. Cutoff's the cutoff, right? It was all over. I didn't know what I was so disappointed. And my dad said, "Well, let's see what we can do." He would always say that is he would hear you, talk about how this is hopeless. That's never going to work. That'll never happen. There's no way through this. He would hear all that and he go, "Well, let's see what'll happen." So I don't know how exactly he did it, but he knew there was a meeting of the board of the club, and he got himself an invite. I now imagine it had something to do with his stature, with his, his support of the club and his presence there. He wasn't a very hands-on guy. He didn't like try to pull strings or doing those kind of things very often. He wasn't directly involved, but he was supportive, and I'm sure he helped support it financially and different things. But he went this time kind of hat in hand. He just made the case. Look, don't Something along the lines, don't penalize Duke because we didn't get him signed up on time. What can we do to make this work? You haven't started practices yet. Season hasn't started yet. Can't there's there some way we can fit him in? And after they mulled that over, they decided to let me play. And I had a great season. And it's just stuff like that. It's like when people tell you it can't happen, you can't do it, there's not a way to do it. That sometimes that's true, but a lot of times it's not. And the big one of the big lessons he taught me is keep looking for somebody that can say yes. There's that's the thing. A lot of times we run into a conflict, we run into an obstacle, and the first line that we run into is usually the person who's paid to say no, and we give up. It's like, well, the rules are the rules. That says what it says. He never cheated to get around something. He would negotiate. He'd make a deal. He would make a suggestion. He would offer another way to look at things. It was always, doing it the right way. And I just love that was his approach. He's like, I can't promise anything, but let's see what happens. Um, you remember the story I told about the circus, and we got there, and the guy said there aren't any tickets, and the ticket booth lady said we were sold out, but he saw that stack of tickets. He's like, well, what about those? And worked out a way to get them. He just The problem was just the beginning of the conversation, not the end. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. The problems we're in, and some can be pretty severe. I mean, what was he going to do? Take care of my terminally ill mom? He came up with some ideas. He hired some help. He made her comfortable. He made sure there was a place for her. He made sure, like I say, the biggest thing he did is he made sure there was help. He didn't try to do it all by himself. He wasn't capable. He wasn't really willing to take all that on because he wanted it done right. So he found ways to get people involved. I just whether it was business or keeping us happy, keeping us going, keeping my mom entertained. He would just constantly be looking for a way. Let's see what can happen. Let's see what we can do. Let's try this. Let's try that. And like I shared in we don't have to do this again chapter, he didn't have to. Some of the stuff he tried didn't work, but he would just pivot. He would adjust. And he would say, well, that didn't work. What else will? One of his biggest passions was getting people that didn't think there was anything out there for them, or they didn't seem like very motivated people, or they seemed stuck in a funk or in a rut. Those were the people that he took on as a personal mission. And he would bring all of his powers of persuasion and encouragement and reframing to try to get them fired up. It could be a nephew, it could be uh, a, a grandson or somebody's grandson or just some kid, one of my friends, or one of my brother's friends, or one of my sister's friends. He was always looking for a way to light a spark, get that spark flared up. He liked to see people have enthusiasm. He liked to have kind of a joy for life. And he just knew that if they understood just what was possible and what they could have and what they could do, they would have it too. And so when problems came up, he would bring that same belief and possibilities to the table. And he would just say, well, it don't like I said, it almost inspired. No one likes problems. He didn't like them, but he just saw them as he accepted the fact they were going to happen. He knew life wasn't perfect. He knew that bad things happen. And he knew that things we don't want to have happen. He knew that people leave. He knew, he had great employees leave and try to start up their own businesses or leave and go to work for a competitor. He didn't like it, but he'd go, okay, now what am I going to do? And he would figure it out. He would acknowledge that it sucked, but he wouldn't use that as an excuse not to keep trying. I remember when I heard stories about when my Uncle Bill, his younger brother, was killed in World War II. He died over in Europe during the battle in the Hurtgen Forest. An awful, awful thing. If you ever have a chance, Google the Hurtgen Forest. It was over in Luxembourg, between kind of near Germany, and one of the most awful battles of the European theater. And that's where my uncle met his end, and it shattered the family for a while. My grandmother kind of checked out for a while. They said that she would lay on the couch for days at a time, not really communicating with anyone. My grandpa was rattled to the core. Maxine, his sister, was a nurse out in Texas, in the, like at a military hospital out there, kind of all on her own with her own grief, isolated. And my dad was living in Lansing with his wife Bonnie, and trying to make ends meet in those days. He had been a little too old to get drafted at the time the war broke out and stuff, but it was my dad that went to them and helped them. I don't want to say, kind of like regain their traction. He reminded them that, hey, it's a tragedy we lost Billy, but there's life that's still to live. We got Maxine in Texas. Think how she feels. Let's be here for each other. Let's get this back up and running. And it was his insights there. And this was even before he really had the epiphany to get on the other side of all the drinking he was doing. But even in those early years, he would have been in his 20s then, late 20s, almost 30. Yeah, about 28 years old when that happened. He still had that sense of there's things we can do. There's a way to make this work. So I just know how big problems can get, and they can fill our vision, and they can overwhelm us, and we can get lost, and we get stuck in them. And it's when we start thinking there's no other way, we're just the way it has to be. It's always going to be this way. It's always been this way. That kind of sense of permanence, that's a trap. He knew that. He's like, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be that way. We can adjust this. We can change that. We can do this different. We can do more of that. He was always experimenting and pushing the possibilities. And I offer that out to anyone here who either listening now or will read this later, to really try that. Try that in, something that seems insurmountable, something that seems intractable, something that just seems that's just the way it is. Test it. Sometimes it is. I saw a quote one time, it wasn't from my dad. It said, every problem has a solution. If there's not a solution, then it's not a problem. It's a fact of life, and you have to deal with it. I like that. But my point is, a lot of things that we don't think have a solution really do. We just ask for enough help, or we didn't learn enough about it, or we don't believe in ourselves enough to think that we're worthy of it, or we don't believe in ourselves enough to think we can figure it out. You can figure it out. The fact that we're still alive, the fact that we've survived all the things we've already survived. If you wonder if you're resilient, if you wonder if you're resourceful, take a minute right now and look back over the whole course of your life, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, 80 years, however long you've been walking the earth. And think about all the things you've been through in your life. And then realize you're still here. You're here. A couple of things. Grace of God, for one, primarily, ultimately. And yet you were resourceful enough to live this long. You were resilient enough to take some losses, take some hits, get through some things, and you're still here. Use that as confidence to keep going. And if you want it to be different going forward than it has been, realize it's just take it up a notch. Get some help, get some advice, read a book, go to a class, find a mentor, find a friend, find a coach, find somebody that already knows how to do the kind of things you want to do. Try it. And if that doesn't work, try something else. Try that thing that you've been putting off. Try to tackle the problem you've been having for a while, that unresolved relationship, that unresolved feud, that health issue, whatever it is, that financial issue. Get an advisor. Do something different. Try it, and just trust yourself, and trust the possibility that it can work. It could be different. Pessimists look at a 50-50 thing and go, it'll probably break bad. An optimist will look at a 50-50 thing, it'll probably work out. And then on top of that, they'll say, and if that doesn't work out, the next thing will. There's always time on the clock. There's always breath in the lungs. There's a way to make something be different. Problems are going to come and go. We're going to last. And we have to keep that in mind too. No problem is permanent. We have a way through. And so that's the idea. If you're spending too much time on the problem and not enough time on the solution, catch yourself. And remember this idea, 10% of the time on the problem, 90% of the time on the solutions, and see how that works for you. Thank you again for being here. That's it for tonight. Thanks for the comments. I'm so glad you guys made it here live. And again, like it, share it, subscribe if you haven't already, invite others. Let's make this thing. I think there's value in these stories that go beyond just me reminiscing. And I hope that we can spread it far and wide. So again, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Some of you I'll see on our Facebook Live thing that we do every day, Monday through Saturday. That's a Bible study thing, totally different thing. But you're welcome to that too. That's a Facebook thing. All right. That's it for tonight. I'll see you next week. Should be 6 o'clock next Friday. I'll post it on some social media. So watch for that for exact time. But again, thank you so much. See you next time. Bye for now.